Hey guys, your boy R's back at it again with another video, and you guys already know what time it is. The big one is coming, the anniversary patch, which means, of course, I have to make another tier list. Be advised that I am not a theory crafter or a guide maker. This is my perspective as a 1,000 plus day free-to-play player. Whether or not you agree with me is completely up to you. Now, the important note for this tier list is that I am predicting where I believe these characters are going to be rated by the end of version 4.x, not how good they are currently. All characters are rated at E0S1 except the Trailblazer, who's rated at E6S0. These are going to be the important differences between my tier list and Prydwen's. Do yourself a favor and pause, take a look at this. Pause, take a look at this. Pause, take a look at this. And with all that out the way, let's hop right into the tier list. All right, it is tier list time. But before we proceed, I am providing a warning. It's a pretty simple warning, but if you ignore it, whatever happens to you is not my problem. So, for those that are aware of the announcement that is expected to come in version 4.3, keep it to yourself. I am not going to be talking about it until it is officially confirmed. If I see a comment talking about those characters, I am going to delete it expeditiously. You will get no warning. You will not get a little slap on the wrist. Instantly delete it. I will not ban you, but I am going to delete it. I'm just being very clear about that ahead of time. I'm letting that be a surprise, and I'm not talking about it until HOYOverse confirms it. So don't try to be that guy. Don't try to be a wise ass. I'm giving you your warning. Don't talk about it. Okay? Okay. Starting off with the sustains, we got Aventurine, we got Luocha, and we got Xuan. Now, initially I wasn't going to talk about the other units that you can slot into your 50/50s, but I figured since this is the anniversary patch, and I know that some players may want my input on those characters, I'm including everybody that you can swap your 50/50s out for. So that includes Xuan, obviously. Now, I've already talked about Aventurine and Luocha, pretty often at this point. As I said before, they're both solid sustains. They're both pretty balanced, but they're not the greatest or the worst of their archetype. Now, Xuan is in a weird position. I think that she is still a solid pickup. However, I wouldn't say that she has aged as well as a unit like Aventurine, per se. Like, she's still solid if you build her correctly. You build her with a pure HP build, she can hold up pretty well. At E2, you get a free revive, but she needs some changes as well. At some point, she's probably going to get Nova Flared. I'm looking forward to that. But I don't think that that's a reason to boot her out of tier 1 per se. She does need some help, but I still use her occasionally from time to time. I'm not saying I use her often, but I do occasionally use her just to see how she does. And she can still sustain pretty well. So I think that tier 1 is plenty fair. So all three, tier 1. Moving on to HuoHuo. As I've said previously, I think that she's going to be tier 0. I've seen the videos talking about her. I think that the Doom posting about her is very much over-exaggerated. She's still a very good sustain in 90 to 95% of scenarios that you're going to be using her in. For some reason, everyone keeps throwing her into the deep water in like 5 to 10% scenarios where she's not good at sustaining and using that to justify talking shit about her, which is kind of crazy. Now, I get it, right? I understand that she could have been much better. I'm disappointed that she's not much better. But to pretend like this character has no value, to pretend like this character isn't good and isn't worth picking up when she's literally free is kind of outrageous. Granted, she is still a better amplifier than she is a sustain from my perspective, but it doesn't change the fact that she still has very good sustain capabilities and has very good sustain potential. I think that tier 0 is doing her justice, and I'm going to be using her as well. Now, granted, there is most likely going to be other sustains down the line that are going to be better than her, but I don't think that's going to necessarily boot her out of tier 0. It's just that they'll be able to cover more scenarios that she's not able to cover. From my perspective, any sustain that allows you to cover 90 to 95% of the scenarios that she's going to be in or he is going to be in absolutely deserves to be in tier 0, because the only place that people keep talking about her having a struggle in terms of sustain capabilities is in anomaly arbitration. And I just want to be clear that in my tier list, I'm not really considering anomaly arbitration, specifically because, you guessed it, the majority of players are not able to do those anyway, regardless of whether or not they have a HuoHuo or not. So why would I account for a mode that the majority of players literally can't complete anyway? Right? It doesn't make any sense. So in the standard 3 endgame modes, meaning Memory of Chaos, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow, I think she's going to be tier 0, and I think that's a pretty easy determination for me to make. So she is going into tier 0. Moving on to Hyacine. I've already talked about her in detail. Legitimately the most meta warping sustain that we've ever had. Super broken, super consistent, does great damage, and basically never lets your health touch the red unless she comes across a unit like Pollux that cheats out health. So outside of those scenarios, or even in those scenarios, it really doesn't matter. There is no boss that she can't sustain through. There's no elite that she can't sustain through, and there's no gimmick that she can't sustain through. She is the best of the best, cream of the crop, been dominating the sustain game for well over, I think, a year now, or I guess slightly under a year. I can't remember when she released, my bad. But she's been sustaining top of the league, top of her game for a extended period of time, so absolutely deserves to be in the Trailblazer tier. Moving on to the amplifiers, I am demoting the Elation Trailblazer into tier 1. Now, I already know that somebody somewhere is like, no, that doesn't make any sense. They're going to be best in slot in Elation for a while, yada, yada, yada. Listen, like I said, my tier list is aiming to figure out, or at least predict, where these characters are going to be by the end of the version. And while I expect that on release they're going to be very strong, I do not anticipate that for the entirety of the version. The changes that they got were insanely disappointing. I do not care for this character at all. I acknowledge that from a free-to-play perspective, this absolutely is going to be the best in slot within the Elation comps for now, but I don't think that's going to be the case for the entirety of this version. I think that there are going to be better units that are going to come out that can support better than them, because let's be real, the Elation Trailblazer only provides a meaningful buff with their ultimate, and outside of that, they're largely a sub-DPS, which makes absolutely no sense, but that's just the way it is. That E6 change where they made it so that they give themselves more crit damage is outrageous. I don't know what they were thinking about when they did that, but the only thing that I can guess at this point is that they wanted to provide those previous E6s to some other support, and they're going to be the premium option. So it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but they're kind of in a bad spot right now. So I fully expect them to be the best free-to-play option, that's not really saying much, considering the fact that if we look at Silverwolf's team specifically, you could literally just run Asta and it'll still perform well. So how a brand new quote unquote free 5-star support is being competed with by Asta of all characters, is crazy to me. But that's just the way things are right now. So tier 1, that's where they're going to go. Moving on to Cerydra. Now, I'm questioning whether or not I want to leave them in tier 0.5. There isn't a lot of teams where they are actually useful. Like I said, we have Finon, we have Archer, we have Anaxa, and we have Sele that's upcoming. But outside of that, there are not a lot of use cases where they are actually top tier. So I'm deciding whether or not I want to demote them to tier 1 as well. So I'm going to think about that while I work on these other units. So tier 0.5 for right now, unless I decide to adjust them to tier 1 before this video is over. Moving on to Silverwolf. Easy tier 0.5. Very, very good debuffing capabilities. You'll be able to swap them in as a 50-50 option. I absolutely think they're worth it. They just have very good universal application. However, as I've said before, universal units have been losing their luster. And there are some niche units that are also losing their luster, like Cerydra. So I think that tier 0.5 is a good spot to put them in. However, you could make an argument that they belong in tier 1 instead. I'm going to put them in tier 0.5, and we're going to move on to the new Blade. Now, based off of the information that I've heard thus far, along with where they are expected to be slotted, they are supposed to be an amplifier and a DPS in one. Now, the question is whether or not they will be a sub-DPS or a main DPS. I am expecting sub-DPS, so I'm going to rate them there. I think that as an amplifier, they're most likely going to be tier 0 just due to the lore significance of Blade. And I think as a sub-DPS, given that they're a Nihility unit, they should be tier 0.5. Now, it's a possibility they're tier 0 in both, but I don't want to jump the gun on that, and this is predictive anyway, so I'm allowed to be wrong, obviously. So tier 0 as an amplifier and tier 0.5 as a sub DPS. The only thing that I know about these guys at this point is they're supposed to be slotted into a future quote-unquote all-male team. And beyond that, he is supposed to have 2 forms. One in which he has DPS capabilities and another one where he has support capabilities. Do with that information as you will. Tier 0.5 for sub DPS. Tier 0 for amplifier. Moving on to Sparkle. Pretty strong Harmony unit. Her performance in all modes have been fairly solid. I would say actually pretty good, to be honest. Even in Anomaly Arbitration, they're doing pretty well. But granted, that is partially due to the nature of the patch and shilling, so I don't know how long that's going to last. But I expect that at the very least they're going to be tier 0 for the entirety of this version. They are legitimately that good. But the question is, how many more units can actually take full advantages of her buff, aside from maybe D-Hill and Archer and Sparxie? So maybe they drop another skill point intensive unit down the line. We'll have to see. But regardless, because of the fact that Sparxie and Archer are so good right now. Gotta put her in tier 0. Moving on to Yao Guang. Tier 0, not really a question about it. She is the glue for the Elation path currently, and I mean, effectively, if you don't have her and you're planning on pulling Evanescia or the new Silverwolf, who is also known as Superwolf now, good luck to you. I tried to tell people that she was a must pull for the Elation path, and that if you planned on investing in Elation, that you needed to pull her. And for some reason, people did not listen to that warning. So it is what it is. Now, granted, I'm not the only person who said that. There are other content creators that made the same argument, but people kept trying to doom post her and thinking that she was going to be useless, and they were completely and utterly wrong. Not having her on your Elation comp is more devastating than any other character not being on the comp effectively. So you kind of need this character if you're going to be using Elation. So if you didn't get her and you planned on going to Elation, you're going to have to wait for a rerun, because pulling for the Elation hyper carries without her is very copium. So tier 0 is where I'm going to put her. Moving on to the Dahlia. Now, I have never gotten the chance to actually rate this character, because when I was going to cover her patch, I had to make a bunch of videos about Tribbie, so I didn't have time to do that. And then I also had to make a video about Cyrene, so I had no time to make that tier list at that time. But we're here now, first time me rating her, and just want to say, absolutely broken. One of the most meta warping amplifiers to have ever released in the game. She basically put the entirety of Super Break on her back. She is really, 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 really fucking good. So if you plan on investing into Super Break, and that's a comp that you're interested in, you need this character. And her Eidolons are also really good, so you might want to invest in those as well. But regardless, super good amplifier, just generally really valuable, and this is the easiest tier 0 that I've ever had the pleasure of giving out. That's all. Moving on. Now, Sunday, my boy, oh man, you got power crept. What a shame. So, he's currently not best in slot in any major archetype, and he's basically been relegated to being a tertiary or secondary option in a lot of teams. So, allegedly, heavy emphasis on allegedly, he is supposed to be getting Nova Flared. Now, I don't know whether or not that's true or not, but that's the argument. Even with the Nova Flare, I still think that he is going to end up being tier 0.5. It's not because he is a copium unit or anything like that. I still use him. It's just that, as I've said a million times, these universal supports are starting to age poorly because the developers are going out of their way, right? They're going out of their way to make these cookie cutter teams. So even though this unit is good, there are better options within the best teams in the game that you can use instead. So for that reason, I'm putting him in tier 0.5. I wish I could rate him higher, but right now I can't. So tier 0.5 is where he's going to go. I hope he actually does get a Nova Flare so that he's better. But again, doesn't really have any best in slot options right now. So tier 0.5 is where he's going to go. And we meet again, Tribbie. Oh, you sweet summer child. The mental anguish that you've caused me in version 3. Unbelievable, man. Truly unbelievable. The amount of glaze, people making it seem like if you didn't pull this character, you bricked your account. People going out of their way to tell others to not pull Cyrene, and that unironically that E1 Tribbie had higher value. Oh boy, what absolutely dog shit takes. I am legitimately the only content creator that I can think of that called bullshit on this character the instant that I saw her, and maintained that energy for the entirety of version 3 because I knew that Cyrene was coming out and I had a very good feeling that she was going to be better than Tribbie long term. And, well, per the data, I was 100% correct. Tribbie effectively went from being best in slot and from anywhere from 5 to 10 different teams to now being best in slot in about 2 teams. One is Herda's team, which, if you didn't notice, Herda is literally one of the worst version 3 DPS in the entire game. And then the other unit that she is used with is Ashveil, and Ashveil's final team isn't going to have her on it. So that is kind of tragic for her, but it is what it is. I did try to warn people about this character, and I was called a simp, an idiot, and all sorts of other derogatory terms because people didn't want to come to the reality that this character, unironically, is the most overrated unit that has ever released in this game. And I mean that with my whole chest. I have never seen a character like her be unjustifiably glazed to the degree that she got glazed, despite the glaring flaws in her kit. And mind you, I am not a theory crafter, I am not a guide maker, and yet I saw these things, and many content creators did not see the same things that I saw. Even before Cyrene release, people who are credible in the community were still telling players that E1 Tribbie was going to have more value than Cyrene, and they were wrong. 100%. They were wrong. Cyrene is best in slot in more teams than Tribbie is and ever will be from here on out. She has been able to be slotted into the Elation comps when people were making the same argument for Tribbie, that Tribbie was going to be able to slot into Elation. She can't, but Cyrene can. And realistically, anything that Tribbie can do, Cyrene can do better. So, awkward. That's all I can really say. The past 6 months, I've been tracking data between Tribbie and Cyrene has eclipsed her everywhere. Memory of Chaos, Pure Fiction, Apocalyptic Shadow, whatever you can think of, Cyrene is better than her. So, with that being the case, I'm putting her in tier 0.5. The fact that she is still tier 0, despite the fact, again, within the past 6 months, she went from being a best in slot in 5 to 10 different teams to 1 to 2, which is something that I predicted. I said that via historical precedence, units like Tribbie end up only being best in slot in 1 to 2 teams, and I was correct. Whether or not you want to continue to believe that this character unironically is tier 0 is up to you. I don't care. End of the day, the data is on my side. I'm the one who made the prediction that this unit was going to start suffering a catastrophic fall off, and people did not listen to me. So if you still choose to believe in this unit modern day and you still think that this is the quote unquote GOAT, that's on you. You're allowed to be delusional and wrong. That's your right. But just know that you're delusional and wrong, right? Cyrene is currently the amplifying GOAT. I try to tell people later on down the line in version 3, a character was going to come out that was going to make Tribbie look like shit, and it was Cyrene. and people did not listen to me. So here we are. Now, with all of my gloating out the way, and I have the right to gloat because of all the insults that were thrown my way, I absolutely have the right to gloat. With that being said, does that mean that Tribbie is a bad unit? No. I have never said that Tribbie is a bad unit, and I will never say that Tribbie is a bad unit. At E1, she is still a really good unit, but the problem is that she's basically the best secondary option that you could ask for, if that makes any sense. However, we're talking about units from an E0 S1 perspective. We're not including E1s, obviously. So if we look at her from base at E0 S1, she obviously belongs in tier 0.5. Why she is still tier 0 in, I think, every mode per Prydwen is incredibly disingenuous. As I've already said, literally only best in slot in 2 teams, with one character who is utterly irrelevant and the other unit who is going to be used on a completely different team that doesn't have Tribbie on it. So if you want to go out of your way to pull this unit, continue to glaze this unit, whatever it is you want to do, I don't care. Leave me out of it. I said my piece multiple times already, and I will continue to say my piece until we're all on the same page. What's very interesting, though, is that I haven't seen a lot of the same content creators who were glazing the shit out of this character for basically the entirety of version 3. I don't really see them recommending Tribbie this time around. Odd, isn't it? So tier 0.5 is where she goes. Now, for my goats, I am making a completely separate section of the video that is starting now. This portion is more scripted than the other portions because I want to be as clear as humanly possible about these characters. I don't know how much clearer I can possibly be given that I made a 1-hour video talking about both of these characters, but I'll do it again. So let me go ahead and put them both in Trailblazer tier. Okay. Now, I am most likely going to be changing this positioning after I release another video down the line due to data that I have looked over in the past 6 months. But because that video has not released yet, I am going to be leaving both of these units within this tier for the time being. Now, let's just go ahead and hop into the script that I have for both of these characters. The first one being Ruan Mei, because I sort of want to explain why I value these characters, where these characters are still good, weaknesses, all that jazz. Again, I have a whole video talking about this, but I'm going to be dedicating a specific portion of this video to talking about these two specifically. Now, Ruan Mei is what I would call a non-conventional scaling support. Non-conventional scaling supports are best used with non-attack scaling DPS / supports. Ruan Mei currently is most valuable in break comps, HP scaling comps, and speed scaling comps. For break comps, while she is not a best in slot in super break teams, she still holds value in those compositions, specifically with the strongest super break DPS in the game, that being Firefly. She would be replacing Fugue in that composition unless you already own a hyper invested Fugue, so E2+. Firefly is in a unique class of her own because when optimized, she can run sustain lists rather often, which is something that Ruan Mei excels at due to her increased break delay and weakness break efficiency. Of course, Rappa and Boothill can run sustain lists as well, but I think Firefly has taken the sustain list crown within super break comps. For HP scaling teams, she can be used pretty well with Castorice, Evernight, Jinglu, or Blade. Although there is some anti-synergy with Castorice because Castorice likes to take damage to build up charge, and Ruan Mei doesn't really let her do that. However, in Apocalyptic Shadow, where breaking is of high importance, that anti-synergy turns into pure synergy because Castorice's high toughness bar breaking efficiency plus Ruan Mei's improved weakness break efficiency and break delay becomes a very potent combination. For speed scaling teams, we've got a bit of a mixed bag. While Ruan Mei on paper should have decent synergy with Superwolf, in reality, it's kind of copium. The reason why is because the overwhelming majority of her damage is elation damage, something that cannot be influenced by other traditional damage modifiers. So, although the 10% speed boost would boost Superwolf's damage slightly, the rest of Ruan Mei's buffs would be largely wasted. For Superwolf specifically, Asta would actually be a better free-to-play option since the flat speed that Asta provides would be of greater boon to Superwolf's speed scaling trace. It's pretty potent. On the other hand, there are two units that Ruan Mei has excellent synergy with, namely Hyacine and Cyrene. Unlike Superwolf, both can take full advantage of Ruan Mei's buffs, which allows them to tap into their DPS potential without requiring the entire Mono Remembrance roster. For Hyacine, not only does Ruan Mei increase her damage, but she can also directly influence her max HP and outgoing healing, since Hyacine and Ika gain 20% HP and improve outgoing healing scaling beyond 200 speed. Getting Hyacine to 200 speed can be difficult to achieve for some players. However, if you get as close to 200 speed as possible and use the Messenger or the Warrior Goddess set, you can consistently pass that threshold. If you stack the Eternal Land Planar set on the Remembrance Trailblazer or Cyrene, this threshold no longer becomes a pipe dream, but an inevitability. For Cyrene, she's legitimately unbelievable. Not only does Cyrene take full advantage of nearly every one of Ruan Mei's buffs up to E1, but she legitimately allows Cyrene to be utilized as a main DPS when paired with Evernight. While Asta does provide better raw speed, that's literally all she can provide to Cyrene. Her damage amp, obviously, is massively inferior to Ruan Mei. At E1, Ruan Mei is providing 68% damage bonus, 25% res pen, and 20% defense ignored. Since Cyrene gets additional ice res pen beyond 180 speed, Ruan Mei plus Eternal Land grants a nice boost to Cyrene's overall DPS. However, the real chaos begins when using Hyacine with Messenger, who grants an additional 12% speed to the mix. This is a very easy buff to maintain early since Cyrene can give Hyacine her ult back. This means that when using Ruan Mei with Eternal Land plus Messenger, Cyrene gets a colossal speed increase. For perspective, my Cyrene currently has 181 speed. With all speed bonuses active, she jumps to 211 speed, meaning a 30 speed bonus, which directly converts to 60% ice res pen on top of all the other damage modifiers that I mentioned earlier. The two team comps that I use the most for DPS Cyrene are Ruan Mei, Evernight, and Remembrance Trailblazer, or I use Cyrene with Ruan Mei, Evernight, and Hyacine. These are not meme teams. They work very well for well-invested Cyrene teams and only become more devastating with Cyrene and Evernight's vertical investment, namely Cyrene's E1 and Evernight's E1. Immediately after Cyrene's release, I zero cycle both sides of Mach 12 using both of the teams that I just described, and I still use them today. Given that Ruan Mei provides considerable value to the best amplifier in the game, the best sustain in the game, and can be slotted seamlessly into a top 4 archetype, Super Break, that means that Ruan Mei has legitimate value in 2 of the strongest archetypes in the game. And before someone says that Tribbie can provide greater amp to Cyrene, I do not believe that that's accurate. Ruan Mei's greater array of damage modifiers improves Cyrene's DPS in a way that Tribbie can't replicate, since she only provides 3 damage modifiers for Cyrene to take advantage of, while Ruan Mei provides 4 and directly affects Cyrene's A6 trace. Of course, Ruan Mei can be used in attack scaling teams. Notably, she has been used in the free-to-play Archer teams, in which the entire roster is completely free, but she's best utilized for non-conventional scalers. I don't think that these synergies are talked about enough, and she is never given enough credit for having this value despite being a version 1 Harmony unit, but it is what it is. If no one else will give Ruan Mei her flowers, I guess it'll have to be me. If you want to see the Mach 12 Zero Cycles that I did on Cyrene's release, links in the description below. At that time, I was using E1 Ruan Mei, E0 Evernight, E0 Hyacine, and E1 Cyrene. Moving on to Robin. Robin is what I would call a conventional scaling support in that she is best used with attack scalers and crit-based hypercarries. Robin is most valuable currently in follow-up compositions, the Fate collab compositions, this is only temporary, and most attack scaling teams. For follow-up, while she's not considered the best in those compositions due to the existence of Tribbie, she's ultimately free. Furthermore, due to her ability to action advance by 100%, she can allow units like Feixiao and Ashveil to take anywhere from 3 to 4 turns within her ult, assuming that you have speed tuned optimally, meaning that both Ashveil and Feixiao have a bare minimum of 134 speed. For the Fate collab units, she's a strong contender again, but situationally. To be clear, I was able to true zero cycle with Archer 2 MLCs ago, and even got nearly 3,700 points with him in Apocalyptic Shadow, so she is strong under certain conditions. For Saber, she is a good secondary option, but is ultimately usurped in value by Cyrene. She can be slotted with Aglaya, Herda, Acheron, Anaxa, Phynon, effectively any attack scaler that you can think of. Now, you may be wondering, wait, this doesn't sound that great. If this is supposed to be a sales pitch, when's the good bit start? Glad you asked. The good bit starts now. The primary issue holding Robin back from reaching her full potential is inarguably her energy issues. Even if you play optimally, without her E2, even the best players will ultimately run into uptime issues. This problem, largely, is no longer a factor. Enter HuoHuo, who of course is also free. Due to the fact that HuoHuo is capable of funneling energy into Robin's ult gauge, Robin finally has someone that can help her manage her uptime. Just like Tribbie likes Hyacine at the highest level, Robin would like HuoHuo in most scenarios. Furthermore, because a high-speed HuoHuo can easily abuse shared feelings, even HuoHuo's skills can be used to boost the team's energy economy. This takes Robin to a different level of consistency at E0 and E1 that she did not have previously. No longer will she be reliant on enemies hitting her and high attack frequency units to maintain her uptime. Now HuoHuo can largely resolve one of Robin's core issues. Her true buffing potential is unlocked at E2, where she not only provides 16% speed within her ultimate, but further resolves her energy issues. At this level, Robin becomes one of the most competitive supports in the entire game that even high-level Honkai Star Rail players utilize to this very day. Now, this section of my script is purely speculative, but hear me out. I believe that the one team that Robin will finally be fully utilized in a way that most people would not expect is with Evanescia. While the Elation Trailblazer will be her free-to-play best in slot, I think that Robin could slot in as a premium slot in their place. Let me explain. Evanescia is a dual scaler in that she utilizes attack and elation damage in order to deal damage. Robin, unironically, can boost both. It's obvious that Robin is still one of the best attack scaling supports in the entire game. That would directly boost the attack scaling portion of Evanescia's damage while making it easier for her to more freely utilize speed boots in her build. Furthermore, due to the Fox being considered a follow-up attacker, that attack will be boosted by Robin's A4 trace. But those are surface level boosts. Let's look further. Robin's biggest strength that cannot be replicated and still makes her valuable to this day is her 100% action advance. Similar to how Acheron and Saber can skill and immediately go for another skill after Robin's ultimate, Evanescia can accomplish the same thing. This not only builds up her ult charge, but builds up her punch line and fox charging as well. Keynote, every time that Evanescia skills, obviously, she gains energy. Every time she gains energy, she gets certified banger, meaning that the double skill boosts Evanescia's energy gain, punch line, and certified banger simultaneously. Furthermore, Robin's talent increases all ally crit damage by 20%. Why is that relevant? Because Evanescia's talent converts 20% of her total crit damage to her elation stat. But this isn't even the most interesting bit. The interesting bit is when Robin gets her E2. Do you know who scales off of speed on Evanescia's team? Yao Guang. For every one speed over 120, Yao Guang gains 1% more elation. And what's more interesting is that Yao Guang shares 20% of her elation with her teammates, meaning that the speed boost would ultimately increase Evanescia's elation stat as well. Mind you, I haven't talked about Robin's damage boost, the additional 24% res pin at E1, which combines with Yao Guang's for 44% total, and the additional damage dealt by Robin within her ultimate. When you throw HuoHuo into the mix, this becomes a synergistic concoction that allows this whole team to tick. While the Elation Trailblazer is Evanescia's best in slot, or at least one of them for right now, Evanescia can only be buffed by the Elation Trailblazer's ult within battle. Robin can buff Evanescia with her skill, her ultimate, and simultaneously buff Yao Guang, which will also further buff Evanescia. Assuming that Nihilux is an Elation support who's simultaneously a sustain, Evanescia might end up being a hypercarry that is capable of being supported by a team of white-haired women. Evanescia might be one of the few DPS in the game who can take maximal advantage of every single one of Robin's buffs without explicitly being a follow-up unit, or at least not in the traditional sense. This is just a theory, a game theory. Let me know what you guys think of it. Exiting speculation territory. Robin's E2 also allows her to be used in speed scaler teams as well, and yes, that includes Cyrene, because of course it does. But I wouldn't expect anyone to grab E2 Robin for that reason. As I mentioned previously, Ruan Mei is a better unconventional scaler, as her speed boost is a passive in her base kit, as opposed to having to go all the way to E2 on Robin. Regardless, Robin is still a very good attack scaling support, whose best support is free right alongside her. As I've said before, and I'll say again, I've been using Robin and Ruan Mei for over 2 years now, and they have never failed me. Granted, I've owned both at E1 during this duration, but now everyone has access to the exact same strength. To anyone who unironically thinks that these units aren't good anymore, despite watching me using gameplay that utilizes both of them during several of my videos, despite the fact that I've true zero cycled with both units, despite the fact that I've 3-starred the entirety of Anomaly Arbitration and have never received less than 7 stars during any Anomaly Arbitration release cycle. I don't know what else to tell you aside from the fact that you're lost. I guess I gotta fully zero cycle the supposed whale mode before I can be taken seriously as a free-to-play player. Anyways, I'm once again linking videos showing gameplay for both on top of another video that I made a while ago that discusses the strengths and weaknesses for Ruan Mei and Robin. That video specifically is kind of outdated, but most of my points are still accurate. I will likely have to make an updated version at some point. Just something to consider. Moving on. Alright, with all that out the way, let's jump into the sub-DPS. Starting off with that man Argenti. Same positioning. He's in a very bad spot right now. He's not really best in slot in any team that I can think of. I don't know what they're going to do with this guy, but hopefully he can get a Nova Flare at some point so that he can actually be good. Tier 3 is where I'm going to put him. Topaz, same thing. Not doing too hot right now. She has been completely power crept, has been power crept for a while. She's not terrible, but she's definitely not good. So tier 2 is where she goes. For Black Swan, I am actually going to adjust her up. I've had her at tier 0.5 for a while. I think that she is really good, and her Nova Flare was pretty good. So yeah, Triple Dot is doing pretty good. I don't know what else to say there. She's just a really good unit right now. So tier 0 is where I'm going to put her. Ashveil, still leaving him at tier 0.5. Like I said, I'm very questionable about this unit. You basically have to have a lot of faith in this character in order to think they're going to be really good long-term, even after their best team comes out. I hope that they are so that I can adjust them back up, but I'm retaining judgment on this character, so I'm going to lead them at tier 0.5, so I'm not overhyping them too hard. I think tier 0.5 is fair from my perspective. Kafra goes into tier 0. Not even a question about it. She is the glue for the dot path. She has aged very well and continues to perform well. So tier 0 is where she goes, and I do not expect that to change by the end of the version. Sparxie for sub DPS and main DPS. I think tier 0 for sub DPS and tier 0.5 for main DPS. I do not believe that under any condition she is going to be beyond Evanescia or Superwolf. So I think that she is still a best in slot for Superwolf's team, but I can't see, with the changes that they made to Superwolf, I cannot see her out damaging Superwolf long term by any stretch of the imagination. Idolines are pretty crazy for Superwolf. For Sparxie, not so much. Now, granted, we are talking at E0, but even at E0, Superwolf has been doing pretty good. Now, that could change given the amount of shilling that is being done for the Elation path right now, but the exact same thing happened for the Remembrance path back in version 3. This level of shilling should not be a surprise to anybody. If the developers are creating a brand new path and have to slowly build them out during the version, they need a little bit of help in order to maintain their tier 0 positioning, right? So I still think that Elation obviously is going to be a top 4 art type. I still think that it's going to be good once the shilling is over. I just think that even with the shilling ending at the end of version 4, I think that Silverwolf is going to be beyond her as a main DPS. So I'm going to put Sparxie in tier 0.5. Last but not least, we have Evernight. Absolutely disgusting unit. Insanely strong, insanely broken. One of the most valuable units in the entirety of the Remembrance Path. I would say second only to Cyrene. Really, really, really good. Very powerful. If you picked her up, you should be doing pretty well with her. Even without Cyrene, she can do well. So, given the dominance that she has put on full display for everyone over the past 6 months, there is no question that she deserves to be in the Trailblazer tier. Alright, moving on to the DPS, which as per usual is the most annoying part, and I decided to make this even more annoying for myself by including all the units that can be added to the 50-50 pool. So, we're going to start off with Seele, who was recently Nova Flared. Now, she could be added to the 50-50 pool back in version 3, but at that time, she was still kind of copium. With these new changes, she is definitely a better unit. However, I don't think they went far enough with them. She does have better use cases and can be abused pretty easily with Cerydra, but I don't think that the existence of Cerydra is suddenly going to make Cyrene this meta warping DPS that she once was. I think that she is in a much better position and she is more solid than she was before, but I can't really place her any higher than tier 1. I think that tier 1 might be a bit generous and we might end up moving her down to tier 1.5, but I think that for the time being, she'll be tier 1, and if I see her data dip off heavily after her new Nova Flare, I will adjust her down to tier 1.5. So I think tier 1 is extremely generous. Moving on to Blade. And I'm just going to go ahead and rate D-Hill and Jinglu all at the same time. So they're all in a pretty shit situation as of right now. Mind you, I like all 3 of these units, but wow, they are just not doing too hot right now. Blade and Jinglu specifically got Nova Flared, and they're just not in a good spot, especially at E0S1. With vertical investment, of course, they become much better units, and that's for all 3 of these guys. But this is a E0 tier list, and at E0, they are not that good. So, tier 2 is where they go. They're not terrible units. They're just not really great either. They're okay. Moving on to, I guess we'll do Genuine, who's still buns. Still waiting for that Nova Flare. Nothing else for me to really say there. He's legitimately bad. So, tier 3 is where he goes. Yunli, tier 1.5. They will get a slight boost with HuoHuo being free, and maybe even with Robin being free, but that, I mean, it doesn't really mean much when her base kit is not broken or anything. As I've said many times, balanced units usually don't do too hot in the meta, and she is one of those units. She's balanced, she is situationally strong, so I think tier 1.5 is more than fair. She's in not the worst spot, but she could be better. Moving on to Rappa and Boothill, who I'm just going to judge both at the same time. Still tier 1. If you like these units and you own them, then you should be picking up Dahlia if you don't own her already. Now, compared to Firefly, they are just not on the same level anymore. And of course, Firefly is one of the units that got Nova Flared. And when I compared them to her and their clearance data, it is night and day. To be honest, tier 1 might be a little bit generous when comparing their average player data. I think tier 1 is more than fair, and that's where I'm going to leave them. The last 2 units that I'm going to put in tier 1 is going to be Feixiao and Acheron. Both of these units are actually still pretty solid. It's just that there are so many units that are better than them at this time that there is legitimately no way that I can put them in the tier 0 category, in version 4 especially, at E0. So I still use these units. They still do pretty well, but once they get to higher levels of in-game content, they start to struggle without having vertical investment. So it is what it is. They're still 2 of my favorite units in the game, but I can't disregard the weaknesses and issues that they have in order to put them any higher than that. Back in version 3, they were performing pretty well, even at a high level, to the point where they could consistently 3-star the Knights. They could 0 cycle Memory of Chaos, get 3,500 plus points in Pure Fiction. Well, not Feixiao, but Acheron could. And they both did really well in Apocalyptic Shadow. And since then, they've dropped off. So, gonna put both in tier 1, and I think that is more than fair. Next, we're gonna do Ashveil. Ashveil is doing pretty well from a DPS perspective, but that's obviously due to the shilling that's occurring right now for these lightning weakness enemies that they're throwing up for him to devour, pun intended. I don't know whether or not he is going to be in this position at the very end of the version. Right now, he would be considered tier 0, but at the end of the version, I don't know if he's going to be tier 0. So I'm anticipating that he's going to be in tier 0.5, and I think that is more than fair. Next, we're just going to throw Saber and Archer here. Both are still good units, and I anticipate that they're going to get a bit of a resurgence in this version. Now, remember, guys, I told you, don't be little wise asses in the comment section and start spoiling, because I'm going to delete your comments, all right? But I do think that these 2 units are going to get a resurgence, not just because of Robin being added to the store with HuoHuo, but because of something else bigger that might be coming down the line for them. That's as much as I'm willing to say. I don't know if that is going to make them tier 0 or not, but it should definitely improve their standing. So tier 0.5 is where they're going for now. Next, Hysilens. Pretty easy tier 0 placement. Triple Dot is doing really well, and she also has the added advantage of synergizing with Cyrene, the best amplifier in the game. Weirdly enough, Dot has become so strong as a path, I actually didn't realize it, that you can split the composition in half and it still have good functionality, meaning that you can take Hysilens and some other Dot support with Cyrene and then put Kafka and Black Swan on the other side of an in-game content and do well with just those units. So that's pretty crazy. That's something that I didn't think of until I saw some Dot players commenting about it on some other channels when I make comments on other content creators' channels, and someone brought that up, and I was like, you know, you have a good point. Dot is really crazy right now. So, tier 0, pretty easy. Dot is really, really strong right now. It's a possibility that they could be a surprise for me and end up being one of the top 3 archetypes for this version. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but if it did happen, hey, I'm just pointing it out as a possibility. That's all. That's all I'm going to say. Tier 0. Let's get over Firefly. Let's just get this over with. As you guys know, I hate this character. I don't like them. I've never liked this unit. But man, is she good. And I would like to clarify that this tier 0 positioning is mainly predicated on the fact that you own Dahlia. Without Dahlia, I would put her in tier 0.5. But because Dahlia exists and Dahlia is broken, it has, by extension, made Firefly broken. So that's kind of where we are now on top of the Nova Flares. She basically just got rid of the majority of her weaknesses after that Nova Flare. So tier 0, I'm expecting her to be tier 0 by the end of the version. She is the best Super Break DPS in the game. If you were to invest into Super Break during version 4.2 because you're either not interested in Elation or you're not interested in Remembrance, you could get her, get Dahlia, and then get a free E1 Ruan Mei out the store, and you would be good to go. Even if it was just an E0 Ruan Mei, you would be good to go. That team is perfectly serviceable, perfectly strong, and will only get stronger the more investment that you put into it. So tier 0 is where I'm going to put her, and I think that is definitely fair. Moving on to Castorice. And I am putting her in the Trailblazer tier. Now, I already know that some Evernight supremacist is going to come out of nowhere. I'm like, no, that's not. Shut up and listen. Castorice is important to the Mono Remembrance comp. Based off of the data that I have looked over and poured over for the past 6 months, this is still a top 3 DPS in the game, has some of the best clearance data in the game, and can easily delete any of the in-game available to the players currently. She doesn't need Cyrene for functionality. She doesn't even need Evernight for functionality. I was using her back on her release with Ruan Mei and Cypher with Hyacine and was easily zero cycling everything that I came across, or getting 40k plus, or not 40k plus, 40k on one side of Pure Fiction. Did very well in Apocalypse Shadow, and also did very well in Anomaly Arbitration. Additionally, because of the nature of Remembrance, you can split the team in half, meaning you can take a well-invested Castorice with Hyacine, along with a well-invested Evernight and Cyrene, cut them in half, put them in 2 different sides of your favorite in-game content, and absolutely destroy it. And of course, the more vertical investment that you put into these units, the better that they perform. And because of her overwhelming dominance within the in-game over the past 6 months, she absolutely deserves to be in Trailblazer tier. It is not until you get to E2 that the differences between Evernight and Castorice starts to become noticeable. But we're not talking about E2 now, are we? We're talking about at E0. And at E0, both of these units are nigh identical from a data perspective, and in some modes, Castorice performs better at E0 than Evernight. This is not copium, this is objective facts. You can pour over the data if you would like to, but as I've said in my community post, I'm going to be talking about Cyrene, and in that same video, I'm going to compare the data between Evernight and Castorice, and you will see that the differences between the two at E0 is really not that large. It only becomes more noticeable at E2. This is an E0 tier list, and for that reason, she goes in Trailblazer tier. Pretty easy determination for me to make. I've been able to 3-star the King in Anomaly Arbitration with her at E0 4 times in a row. So if anyone has the right to talk about how great Castorice is, it's definitely me. And she deserved that Trailblazer slot. Not arguing with anybody about it. Moving on. Last but not least, we got Evanescia and we got Silverwolf. We're both going to be tier 0, obviously. Now, the question is, which one of these units is going to age better? Now, to preface what I'm about to say, I am biased. I am going to be pulling for Evanescia. That's something that I've wanted to do since last year because I knew that she was coming out since last year. With that being said, I do believe that when things are all said and done, I think that Evanescia is going to be a better unit than Silverwolf. Now, I know that if you watched my raw thoughts on the beta and our anniversary units, I said that objectively, Silverwolf was going to be a better unit. Unfortunately, because I was literally just spewing out my thoughts without any real structure, I forgot to mention the fact that I meant that within the confines of version 4 and its shilling, I believe under those conditions that Silverwolf is going to be superior than Evanescia. However, I think Evanescia is going to age better without the shilling, which is going to make her an overall better unit. I have looked at more gameplay since then, thanks to one of my guys that I frequent on his channel, and he knows who he is. But thanks to him and a bunch of other content creators that I have watched, I have made the determination that I think Evanescia, once all this shilling is out the way, once Silverwolf is no longer basically being fed free punchline stacks, I think that Evanescia is going to age better as a unit. I think that because the overwhelming majority of Silverwolf's damage is reliant on elation and punchline generation from enemies, that once version 4 ends, or when we get to the end of version 4 and that shilling slows down, I think that her performance is going to start to suffer as a result. Whereas I think Evanescia's performance will either improve or basically maintain the exact performance that she'll have from release. So that's my perspective. I do believe that both are insanely strong units. I just think that Evanescia's value is a little bit higher. So I think that this tier list is pretty good. As always, we'll make a cleaner version for anyone to view in my community post later. But that's all I'm going to say about this tier list. Let's move on to the pool recommendations. Moving on to the pool recommendations, and the important note here is that all pool recommendations are based on my experience and perspective as a free-to-play player. Pool value is also considered using a character's rating from the previous list. This tier list includes their Eidolon value up to E2 max. Now you can pause and read the rest of this. Pause and read this. And let's just jump straight into the pool recommendations. Of course, we get the Golden Companion Spirit, but I'm still going to put him at low AV. Going to put HuoHuo as a must pool for newer and free-to-play players. And I'm also going to put Xuan in low AV. We'll talk about her last. I'll say should pull for the new blade form as an amplifier. Comfort pull as a sub-DPS. These two are going to remain exactly the same. They are still skips. Do not waste your time with them. They both are pretty bad right now. The OG Silverwolf is still pretty good, and I think that she has value, so definitely add her to her definitely add her to your 50-50 pool. Of course, both of these units are still should pulls because they're free, obviously. We'll adjust this around later. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be clean. Dahlia, to be honest, we got to make a special slot for Dahlia. She's kind of different. I guess I should clarify that if you are investing in Super Break and you care about Super Break, this is a must pull. Point blank, period. Must pull. But outside of that, she definitely is a should pull if you're interested in dipping your toes into Super Break. That's something you're interested in. But she is really, 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 really good. As a matter of fact, no, I'm just going to leave her there. I'm just going to leave her there because I did the same thing for Yao Guang. And of course, if you want context for the tier list, then obviously you should watch this video as opposed to looking at the finalized version of the tier list. So for Super Break, absolutely must pull, not really optional. Super important. For Sunday, I'm going to say low AV. I like this unit, but there are going to be much more valuable units that are going to come out down the line. So I'm going to put him as low AV at this time. Basically, if you already have him and you want to invest in his Eidolons because you believe, if you believe that he's going to be Nova Flared, that's your prerogative. That's up to you. Pulling him from scratch at this time, when I know what's coming out down the line, no. Can't highly recommend this unit at all. That's just the way that it is. And of course, last but not least, we have Tribbie. The Tribbie Glazers are going to get big mad at me for saying low AV. As I've already said, this unit is not best in slot in any of the major archetypes in the game. She went from being best in slot and from about anywhere from 5 to 10 teams to 2, and one of those teams is largely meta irrelevant. So, given that I know what's coming out, I am not going to put my full weight or even attempt to put half my weight behind this character. Like I said, she is the best secondary option that you could possibly ask for. But is it worth wasting your premium J's on? Not really. Now, if you have a Tribbie at E0 already, if you want to go for E1, that's more than fair. But if you're talking about starting from no Tribbie and ending at E1 Tribbie, you're kind of insane. I don't know what you have been fed. This unit is not the end-all be-all anymore and hasn't been for any time frame that she has existed. That's my perspective. Now, just understand that if you ignore that warning and you decide to listen to these Tribbie Glazers, right? They don't tell you about her weaknesses. They don't talk about the problems that she has within her kit. And they definitely don't want to tell you about what's coming out next, because that'll make you even less inclined to pull for her. But if you waste anywhere from, mind you, just as an example for myself, personal example, when I pull my E1 Evernight, I got really unlucky and I basically had to waste 160 pulls, and that was for one Eidolon. If you are not willing to sacrifice anywhere from 160 to 200 plus pulls on this unit that is not best in slot in any major archetype in the game right now, then don't pull them. It really is that simple. If, again, E0 to E1, valid. E1 Tribbie is still really good. Not going to question that. But could you just get a free Ruan Mei or a free Robin and still do well in the game? Absolutely you can. I am not saying that those two units, Ruan Mei and Robin, are better secondary options than Tribbie. I am saying that from a pull value perspective, wasting your resources on a unit that you know has fallen off, that you know is at best a secondary option in the overwhelming majority of compositions in the game, that is foolish and delusional. And anyone who tries to tell you that pulling this unit should be some sort of priority that you should be worried about, knowing what's coming out in version 3.3 and beyond, or sorry, version 4.3 and beyond, I don't know if I can trust somebody's judgment who would say something like that. If she was free and she was in the store, she's up here. I'm not going to argue with anybody about that. She be there. Spending your premium resources? Anywhere from 160 to 200 plus pools? From scratch? There's no way anyone who is a reasonable individual could make that argument. Nobody. There's no reasonable individual that can make that argument. So, given that I know what's coming beyond this, especially knowing what we know now about Cyrene and how everybody, damn near everybody, completely misjudged how good Cyrene was going to be. How Cyrene has dog-walked Tribbie damn near everywhere. Sorry, I say damn near because I'm trying to be nice. That's the nice part of me. Dog-walked everywhere. Everywhere. Even within Tribbie's own composition that she was supposed to support. Erudition? It's cooked. Alright? Anaxa is better than Herta. And Cerydra and Cyrene are preferred in Anaxa's comp over Tribbie. It's up. Overhyped her. Y'all did too much. You tried to make this argument that all these universal units was going to make Cyrene not age well. You were dead wrong. Not kind of wrong. Completely wrong. It's time to adjust the way that we look at these units. It's time to adjust the way that we look at pool value. Again, I tried to tell people that investing all your resources into these quote-unquote universal units, your premium resources, was a bad idea given the developer's direction and what they were going to do with these teams moving on down the line. But people ignored what I said. They thought, people still think, oh, all these universal units, they're all great. The developers are trying to create teams. Teams. Individual units on their own carrying your whole account is not an optimal way of playing the game anymore. That era is over. If you want to have your mediocre performances relying on a quote-unquote all these universal units, that's your prerogative. Just telling you, you got Ruan Mei in the store for free. You got Robin in the store for free. Personally, if you are a newer or free-to-play player, I would recommend that you go for Ruan Mei instead because she is significantly easier to use. But I am never, ever going to highly recommend Tribbie to anybody until she's free. Period. You can be mad. You can say whatever you want about me. But what you can't call me is a liar. Moving on. Yunli, low AV. Definitely a should pull. I'll put her there. Comfort pull. Yeah, I think that's fair. Comfort. That's fair too. Obviously, should pulls. Pretty obvious. I might have to shrink these down a little bit because we got one more entry. Low. I mean, Blade is. It sucks to be Blade right now. I'm gonna have to put him as a skip. I know that a lot of people like Blade. I like Blade too, but yeah, he doesn't have a lot of value right now, so he's gonna be in the skip section. Now, I think Comfort Pool is fair. And that's more than fair. Now, in terms of which one of these DPS units are the most valuable, that is purely subjective. So that depends on what you actually care about. If you don't care about Elation, then obviously Firefly or Castorice is going to be more appealing to you. If you care about Elation, then the other two are not that appealing to you. So this is what I'll say. I think that from a pool value perspective right now, I think that Evanescia, number 1, Castorice, number 2, assuming that you're interested in going into Remembrance, otherwise you can disregard that. Silverwolf, number 2 or 3, depends on your perspective there. And then Firefly, number 4. The gap between these units is not... I can't say what the gap really is from a data standpoint because I haven't directly compared, especially between Firefly and Castorice, because the only thing that I could compare before was Castorice and pre-Nova Flared Firefly. I don't know how these 3 units are going to compare to Castorice at E0 or even E2+. But regardless, all of these units are really good. I expect them to continue to perform well throughout the entirety of version 4. If you're going to choose one, that is up to you. I cannot make the determination for you. Just being clear, if you are interested in investing into Firefly, you gotta grab that Dahlia first, which is part of the reason why I put her up there as opposed to putting her down as a should pull, because I wanted to be visually as glaring as possible. If you're going for Firefly, grab the Dahlia first. For Evanescia and Superwolf, both of them can function pretty well with the Elation Trailblazer, and this is without having their other support, their new premium support, which I am expecting to be Nihilux. But again, if you do not have Yao Guang, I cannot recommend that you pull either one of these units. Now, for Castorice, Castorice can still perform well even without Cyrene or Evernight. If for some reason you skipped Evernight in this version, of course you're not going to have Cyrene if you're brand new. You can still run Castorice with Ruan Mei. Hopefully you have picked up Hyacine. But even if you don't have Hyacine, you can still use her with a Gallagher or a Luocha and other healing supports. Although it's definitely not going to be as good as if you had Hyacine. I can only really put high emphasis on Castorice if you did pick up Hyacine. If you did that, then Castorice will perform well even without Evernight or Cyrene. And if you're interested in going into the full comp, hyper investing into it, just a reminder, you hyper invest into the comp, you can literally split the team in half and it will perform well. Any content creator worth their salt would tell you that. All right. Now, for Sub-DPS, it's just Blade. So he has the highest value here, without question. Like I said, these two units down here are pretty buns. It is what it is. Not my fault. That's just the way things play out. Now, from the amplifier perspective, I think that given the fact that we know that Super Break is insanely strong right now, and we don't really have to make any speculations, she absolutely would be a must pull for anybody that's interested in Super Break. Again, you're not interested in Super Break, then obviously you just skip her, right? I'm skipping her. But I'm just going to be as clear as possible for the newer players that are coming into the game. If you like Firefly, you like Super Break, grab this Dahlia. If you can, grab some of her Eidolons, but if you're a free-to-play player, you may not be able to do that. Regardless, make sure you get a copy of Dahlia, then grab your Firefly. Okay? Okay. And also, grab Ruan Mei so that you can round out your comp. That should be, if you only have one Golden Companion Spirit, once version 4.2 rolls around, again, Firefly, Dahlia, Ruan Mei. That's your team. It'll be good. I promise. It will actually be really good. Trust. All right? Now, for HuoHuo, again, I get it. There are seasoned players and content creators who are not too pleased about the way that she turned out. But again, I am not going to discredit this unit because of the 5 to 10% of scenarios where she struggles. That doesn't make sense. That is absolutely not fair to her as a unit. It's BS. I don't agree with it. I still think that she holds high value for any newer or free-to-play players, and trying to disregard her when she's literally free is crazy to me. She is easily in top 3 in value from a limited perspective within the store right now. It's Robin, Ruan Mei, and HuoHuo. I think that HuoHuo is above those. Now, let me be clear on something else as well, because as someone who has owned Robin since she has released and someone who knows her weaknesses and strengths inside out, let's talk about Robin as a sidebar, okay? If you own no copies of Robin, right, but you want to own Robin, pulling her without owning HuoHuo is not advisable. Simultaneously, if you have E0 Robin currently and you have no HuoHuo, that is not advisable. Unless you have E1 currently and you're going to E2, you're going to need this HuoHuo in order to maintain her uptime in more situations than she could previously. This is not really optional. And I don't know why this isn't really talked about a lot within these conversations about HuoHuo. So, I'm not saying that you should go all the way up to E2 on HuoHuo or anything like that. I think that if you were to vertically invest into HuoHuo, you should grab her E1 and stop there. But you don't need to go for her E1 at all. I think that Robin's vertical investment is much better than HuoHuo's. It's just that, again, without having that E2 on Robin, you're going to run into energy issues. I've been using her since her release. Like I said, I know her weaknesses inside and out. You're talking to somebody who was able to, who's 3 stars Knights with her, who can true 0 cycle with her, get high level clears and pure fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow with her. She runs into energy issues much more often in version 4 than she ran into in version 3. And as a result, you're going to need that HuoHuo if you intend to use her at E0 or E1. Now, if you already own E1, like I said, you grab that E2, right? And you may not want that HuoHuo in that scenario, skip them. But if you already have them at E1, then you're not a new player anyway, so this conversation isn't even directed towards you. This is a newer player conversation, so I think that for newer players, players that are free to play, that have been playing for less than a year, grab that HuoHuo. Absolutely. Now, in terms of pull priority, it depends on what you care about. Again, Robin and Ruan Mei are both different levels of support. I think that Robin is a conventional, traditional attack scaling support, whereas Ruan Mei is sort of non-conventional because she can support HP archetypes, speed, and break. If you care about the unconventional supports or the unconventional archetypes, you pull Ruan Mei. I would stop at E1 because her E2 kind of sucks. I have E2 Ruan Mei, but I did that purely because I care a lot about Ruan Mei and I wanted to E2 her. That was my decision. Not something that I would recommend people do. All right. For Robin, you can go from E0 to E2 if that's something that you're interested in. E2 Robin is really, really good. And for HuoHuo, I would stop investment on her at E1 and save your balls for something else. Now, I know the elephant in the room is Welt. Of course, it's got to be Welt. But he's a standard banner character, right? And I don't like judging standard banner units. Additionally, he doesn't really become good until E4, and he's outside the bounds of what I set as a requirement of stopping at E2 max, right? However, if you're one of those guys that loves Welt, all right, that's your guy. That's your man's, all right? If you already have him at E3, you absolutely should use your ball to get him at E4 because he becomes a completely different unit there. He is good. I am not going to question that. As a matter of fact, and this is the part that's even crazier that I'm surprised nobody brought up, E4 Welt is fucking competitive with Tribbie in terms of amplification. That's literally one of the primary reasons anybody pulls for Tribbie. And Welt is absolutely super competitive with Tribbie in terms of amp. But I guess we can't afford to let Tribbie look bad, even worse than what she already is. But outside of that, you want to go E3 to E4, I get it. If you already have E3 and for some reason you've saved all of your balls trying to get that man to E6, knock yourself out. However, if you're a brand new player and you're like, oh wow, Welt looks really fun, he looks really cool. This man is not going to live up to your expectations until he gets to E4. Do not waste your balls on getting an E0 Welt. That is a absolutely terrible idea. This is only advisable for somebody that already has enough invested into Welt to get him easily to E4 and beyond. If you don't do it. Not advisable. Doesn't make any sense for you to do that. Okay, I've been talking for too long and my stomach keeps growling, which is pissing me off. So I guess that's time for me. I gotta wrap this up. Gotta put it into this video. All right. This is a chaotic damn tier list to look at. But I think this makes sense. We're going to make a cleaner version for everyone to look at later. So this is the full tier list. And this is the in-game tier list. Again, I'm not really taking the anomaly arbitration into account here. All right. So this is for the 3 primary modes. I think this is where these units belong. Again, this isn't exactly super clean, not as clean as I would like. I'm going to make a clean version to put in my community post later. If you liked the video, if you think what I said was informative, hit the like, subscribe, share, whatever it is you have to do. Again, I already know for a fact that the Tribbie Glazers are going to descend upon my video because they don't like what I have to say about her. I don't care. Be mad about it. But that's all for me. Your boy Scrub Hero R's is out.
Hidden my strength aside, my grief and sorrow. Keeping the light on in the dark place was a pain. Been trying to be the best, it's been a war within. Losing, but I felt like I was born to win. I was born to win, I was born to be great. The sun may never shine upon the hero.